Alright. The first rule of the textbook correct pronunciation for Agirowen is that there's a one-to-one correspondence between letter and sound. So, regardless of where in a word a letter appears, or what other letters are next to it, it always has the same sound. It's the one sound for that letter. So, like how in English, if you put, or in Spanish, if you put a letter, if you have a letter and then it's followed by an E or an I, it sometimes makes a different sound than if you follow it up with an A or an O. In Agirowen, that's not a thing. Especially not textbook correct dialect or, similar dialects. It's one-to-one. This letter always makes this sound. The second rule is that they only have consonant, vowel, consonant syllables. So even if it's written with fewer letters than would make sense for that immediately, that means that there are consonants that are either implicit, like in the name of the language it has an implicit Y at the start, and or it, but that's like the only word that does that these days. So for most of them it's just, sometimes they might have a consonant that's both the final consonant of one syllable and the initial consonant of the next syllable, so it's kind of used twice. But I don't write it twice because that gets extra long and messy. So that's the basics. And for this lesson specifically, there's a third rule, and that's when I give the explanation of the sound, if I then pronounce the example syllables in a different way, my explanation is correct and my pronunciation of the syllables is incorrect. I have kind of the weirdly chaotic dialect, as I showed earlier in the previous video, so I'll try my best, but I might not get the syllables correctly, but at least I'll pronounce the individual sounds correctly and give a good explanation for how they sound. So, with that out of the way, I'm going to first go through the vowels and then the consonants in Agirowen's alphabetical quote-unquote order, which is this thing. This is the order that the dictionary puts things in based on, and that the alphabet usually goes in based on how frequent the letters are. But anyway, I'm going to start with vowels. So, A goes ah, ah. It's like a shorter version of the sound you make when you see an adorably tiny critter. E goes eh, eh. Like an eh of confusion, kind of. I always goes E, E. It's like in seen or been, but it's also like an eek. O goes O, O, like in tone or atone or throne. It's a O. And then U always goes ooh, ooh, kind of like in moon or soon. Right. And here's the alphabetical order again. G, T, R, K, V, B, D, D, B, S, N, M, Y, W, L. And those go G, T, R, K, V, D, B, S, N, M, Y, W, and L. Now I'm going to go through all those one by one. So G always goes G, G, like it does in Gargantan. Or the English word gargantuan. Those aren't related words, but they look similar. So But G always goes G. It doesn't ever do the J, like in any sort of generosity or giant. It doesn't do that. And it's not like in Spanish where it goes H. G is always G in Agirowen. And like the G in the name is Agirowen. It's not Agirowen, it's Agirowen, because G always goes G. So, for the example syllables where they start with G, there's gan, gen, gin, gon, goon. And here's some example syllables that end in G. Nog, neg, nig, nog, noog. Now, I tried to have as many of these be things that are actually unit syllables, but some of them are just, random things I threw in there because it wanted to keep a consistent pattern of, the letters I'm not focusing on. Okay, next for T. T always goes T. T. It's really big puff of air T. T. It's not the softer T's, but the big puff of air T. It's called the aspirated T. T. So we have ton, ten, teen, tone, tune. And then for syllables ending in T, we have caught, ket, keet, coat, coot. Now for R. Canonically, R is always the trill R. It's like the double R in Spanish. But I don't expect you to pronounce it that way. But just know that if your language, if you know several languages and you know one that has like a hard R and a soft R, or your language has both, this is like the harder R. It should sound kind of like you're growling, like a beast when you say it. So there's ron, ren, reen, roan, roon. And then for syllables ending in R, it's gonna be even tougher to have it be trill-like, but it's still supposed to be canonically a trill. But anyway, nar, ner, near, nor, noor. Right. And I'll do another video later for like words that contain these for the ones that are actually contained in some word. Anyway, K is always K naturally. It's like a very hard sound. Almost all these are hard sounds. It's that kind of language. So K, there's a kas, kes, kis, kos, kus. And then for things ending with a K, knock, neck, neek, nook, nook. Now for V. V is like one of the only soft sounds. Agirowen does not have an F sound, but its V sound is similar to an F sound in a way. It's the fricative sort of V. Vroom vroom, not the. It's not like the V that could be confused for a B. It's the V that like is distinctly a vrooming sort of V, similar to a F. So it's almost like purring, I guess. But anyway, there's a von, ven, veen, von, voon, and then things that end in V. Nov, nev, neve, nov, nuv. Now for D. D is, another hard sound again. So D. So don, den, deen, don, doon. And for things ending in D, rod, red, reed, road, rude. Now B, ba, ba. In this language, D and B are both, equally hard sounds. There's bar, bear, beer, boar, boor, and rob, reb, reeb, robe, rube. Now for S, it's a hissy S sort of. Well, S is kind of a hissy sound normally, but it always is sa, not sha. There's no sh in this language in the textbook correct dialect. There is a dialect where S is always sh, but for now S is sa. So san, sen, seen, sown, soon. And kas, kes, kis, kos, kus. All right. Now for N. N, nar, ner, near, nor, nur. Con, ken, keen, cone, coon. Since N and M are the same against most languages that you are probably aware of, I have much to say except that N is way more common than M is. they're near each other in the order, but like that's partially because they're very similar sounds. But N is way more common than M, but N way more often appears at the end of syllables. Yeah. M almost never appears at the end of syllables, so here I've written just like the two syllables that ever end in M, because there's only ever two. But when M's at the start of a word, m, mar, mer, mere, more, moor. M only appears at the end of chem, and note that this is not a K because it's always a CH sound, but it's the ch. So chem, and that's in things like chemere, which you've probably heard a lot about if you know the lore related to this language. Anyway, and then there's team, which is in like only in like the pair of things tim tone. So so those are kind of rare. Well, chem isn't rare, but like these are the only two syllables that M is at the end of at, so yeah. And team is rare to see. Now for Y. Y is a fairly common thing, at the end of syllables, but not at the beginning. But it's one of the shortest sounds, and it's often used when transcribing, like transliterating a word as a loan word, and needing like a consonant that's super short, so short that it's almost not there. An easy to foreshorten away sound. Y is picked for that in Agirowen, which is related to Y, related to the historical spelling, quote unquote, reasons why the name of the language is usually written without a Y, with the Y being implicit. Anyway, so and that also reminds me, the reason why none of these example syllables have just the same consonant both times is because there's a rule of Agirowen that it can't do that. It can't have a syllable that has the same consonant for both its start and its end. They have to be different consonants involved in one syllable. So anyway, so Y is ya, yan, yen, yin, yon, yun. By the way, most of those are things that appear in the language, but all of them are, but most of them are word roll suffixes. Yan, Y-A-N, yan, is only in the stem of certain words, but yen, yin, yon, and yun are all word roll suffixes for various things. And a similar thing is going on with like ron, ren, and rune. So, but that also highlights how much N appears at the end of things, but not normally at the beginning. And then if it ends in Y, which is, kind of more common, but Y appears the most often in like loanword transcription, as explained earlier. But if it ends in Y, sai, say, si, soy, sui. And now for W, which is it's very close to the end of the alphabet, because it appears very, very rarely. And here's like one that really, really is super rare, but it's also like what you'd expect of a W, probably. Wa. And it almost exclusively appears in these syllables here, which all used to be word roll suffixes in the older language that Agirowen is built off of, which is why it has a wen in its name, but most of the words in the language don't. But they've kind of like later been, used as like outlawed versions of punctuation, because they used to be a word roll suffix. Anyway, wan, wen, ween, won, woon. And for L, la, lar, ler, leer, lor, lure. And at the end, cal, kel, keel, kol, cool.